This is a relatively short case today because there simply isn't the information out there, but it's a case I hadn't even heard of before. It happened back in 2022 and I had no idea about it until it popped up on my research list. It's pretty horrific. It's an important story, and although it is short, the information is pretty grim, so buckle up and let's get into it. This is REDRUM, stories about the true victims of crime. I use news archives, documentary footage and books to research these cases, and so the episodes are accurate to the source materials I can find. You can find all episodes in podcast or YouTube form in the description box down below. Anju Asok had met and married her husband Saju in Kerala in India. Kerala is a state on India's tropical Malabar coast. It's known for its palm-lined beaches and network of canals. The couple went on to marry and they had 2 children, first a boy called Jiva and then 3 years later a girl called Janvi. And as far as Anju was concerned, her family was pretty much complete. But Anju was incredibly intelligent. She actually was training to work as a nurse. And in her opinion, she just knew that there would be better opportunities for her and her family in the UK. And so she set up to make that happen. She was a real go-getter, and so she got her husband and their children ready. They got everything ready to start the move, and it wasn't long before the couple and their now 1 and 4-year-old children were on their way to the UK, and they eventually settled in Kettering, a small market town in Northamptonshire. Kettering isn't really known for much. I'd say there's a couple of alright schools there. It's got some nice countryside surrounding it, but there's not a lot else. It's a commuter town to London, and I suppose it does have its own charm, but as someone who has previously lived there for a very, very long time, I can't tell you exactly what its charm is. Either way, Anju and Saju and their 2 children actually settled down there. They found their new home there back in 2021. And it wasn't long before Anju made sure her family were completely immersed in their community. She got a job working at Kettering General Hospital. She was working on Barnwell B, which was one of the hospital's orthopaedic wards. And the big boss would later speak about Anju as being completely committed to her job. She was compassionate and utterly loved and respected by all of her colleagues, who weren't just her colleagues actually. It wasn't long before they turned into her friends. Anju also made sure to enrol her children in one of the best schools around. They attended Kettering Infant Park Academy, and it was there that they made plenty of their own friends too. All of that would change, however, on the 15th of December 2022. The family had been in the country a little over a year, and thanks to Anju, they really were starting to feel like they were fitting into their community. And they were extremely valued, especially Anju in her work at the hospital, but also just in terms of the friends that they'd made. It doesn't, however, seem that Saju had the same desire to sort of fit in and immerse himself in this life that Anju was building up for them. He didn't seem to have friends of his own in the same way that Anju did. Instead, he stayed at a distance, watching and judging his wife's behaviour and, importantly, wrongly assuming that there were things going on with her. Saju would watch Anju go off to work each day, often working changing shift patterns, as is pretty normal in a hospital situation scenario. And he saw her kind-hearted nature and her desire to want to get to know people as a bad thing. So much so, in fact, he managed to convince himself that his wife, the woman who is the mother of his children, and by all accounts a devoted wife, he managed to convince himself that his wife was being unfaithful to him. I have to say that there's not a huge amount of resource material for this case, and so the specific reasons of why he thought this, or what evidence he believed he had, has never been publicly released. So I'm actually not sure why he thought this. Although, as we get further into the case, you'll probably realise, just like I did, that Saju's thoughts and actions aren't those of a man who is thinking rationally. They're so far away from what I could possibly try to understand that it's hard to kind of grasp the reasons of what he goes on to do. I say reasons, of course. There's never any real reasoning for what he did. He can't even himself come up with a sort of comprehensive, competent version of why he does what he does. Oh, but he does try. Let's go there next, why not? So, as I said, we don't know the exact details of what happened next, but what we do know is that sometime on the evening of the 14th of December, the two children came home from school, and it was a Wednesday evening. It was the run up to Christmas, so no doubt they were probably quite excited and ready for the Christmas break. You know how it is in that run up to Christmas when you're of that kind of primary school age. Everything around that time is just super exciting. So we know that the two children came home, and Anju was there, and Saju was there too. Now, Saju was drinking heavily, and this is something that he did fairly regularly, but this night was a little bit different. Some of the details we know are from this audio recording that had been taken throughout the course of the evening and throughout the horrific events that followed that would continue recording. I couldn't locate the source of the audio, but what I can say is that it doesn't seem like it's massively intentional. The only information about this recording specifically is that it started when the children were singing, so it's likely they were maybe recording themselves and then they just sort of left it on, and that's how it captured the rest of the events of the evening. It was around 10 p.m. that night that the audio captures the two children in the background, and they're crying for their mummy. It's clear they know what's going on. They know that their daddy is hurting their mummy, and they are pleading for him to stop. During this time, Anju was fighting for her life. Saju had taken a dressing gown cord, and he had hastily wrapped it around his wife's neck and began pulling tightly. And he just kept holding on until Anju eventually stopped struggling and went limp. The entire time, both 7-year-old Jiva and 4-year-old Janvi were heard in the background crying. The audio captures the children's cries and screams. And after that, Saju made his way into the lounge, and he sort of fumbles around to find a pen and a piece of paper before sitting down and beginning to scrawl some words onto that paper. And it's words to the effect of a suicide note, but he wasn't done yet. Whilst his wife's body is lying just on the bed in their bedroom, Saju made his way to the kitchen, and that is when he gets out all these things. He gets out sugar, chocolate, and puts some water together, makes this kind of concoction before adding in a large number of sleeping pills and mixing it all together. He then pours that concoction into 2 glasses and then gives it to both of his children. But the children had just seen what their dad had done to their mum, and they were incredibly upset and likely confused, and so they refused to drink this thing that their father had just given them. And that is when Saju decided that he wasn't going to wait any longer. He took that dressing gown cord from next to his wife's body and he walked through to where the children were in the other room. He then placed them both on the bed and individually strangled them. Once they were dead, he then left the bedroom and made his way through to the lounge, where he sat on a chair and just waited. He waited there until 6 a.m. when he heard a knock at the door. Now, this knock was actually expected. It was Anju's work colleague coming to pick her up. The arrangement was that she would come out at around 6 a.m. and they'd be ready then to start their shift at 7 a.m. at the hospital. When Anju hadn't emerged from the house as she usually would, the friend became concerned and decided to go and knock on the door, but there was no answer. This friend then called Saju, and he did actually answer, but he simply told the friend that Anju had already called in sick and she wouldn't be coming into work. Now, of course, at this point, the friend hears this kind of reasoning and is satisfied that the husband is telling the truth. That is the truthful account of what's going on right now. And so this friend just heads to work. But it's when they arrive there that it becomes clear Anju never called into work. And in fact, no one had heard from her all morning. Alongside all of this happening, one of the neighbours had become concerned, and I couldn't find the specific reasoning for why this was, but either way, this reason was big enough for them to call police, and there was a request that a welfare check be done at the residence. So police arrived to Petherton Court at just after 11:10 a.m. that same morning. Now by this point they had received reports that a woman and 2 children had been seriously injured. Again, I couldn't see a specific timeline of how they got this information, but either way, police arrived at the address and they forced their way inside. There was no answer at the door and they decided they had enough reason to force entry. This body cam footage clearly shows police breaking a window to gain entry before walking inside and finding Saju sat in the lounge on a chair.
Just watch that. Please, mate. Put it down now. Mate, put the knife down. Right? Put it down. Okay? Put the knife down. Otherwise you're going to end up getting tasered. Put the knife down! Put the knife down. Put it down now! Put the knife down! Put the knife down. Put it down! Put the knife down.
You shot me.
Put it down! Put the knife down!
You shot me.
Put it down!
Police officer with taser. Is what it looks like. Put your hands behind your back.
After this arrest, the police officers then go to search the rest of the house, and that's when they make the horrific discovery of Anju, which she's dead in one bedroom on one bed, and then the 2 children, Jiva and Janvi, are in another bedroom on another bed, also of course dead. Saju was taken into police custody, and it was there that he revealed that he had been losing control. Anju was cheating on him and he was sure of it. A forensic examination of Anju's phone, however, found that Saju was wrong. His wife had been completely faithful to him, and in an unbelievable, but actually wholly believable in the case of this man, turn of events, it turns out that Saju had actually been the one using dating sites in the days and weeks leading up to the killings. Unbelievable. There was no question of Saju's guilt. In fact, he had written a letter to the police confirming all of his, quote, reasons why he'd done this, and he seems to think he's pretty justified. Meanwhile, the result of the post-mortem comes back and it shows that the 3 family members have all died of asphyxiation. And at trial, that audio recording that was taken during the time of Anju's death and the children's death, that was played for the jury to hear. Quote, while you were squeezing the life out of your wife, your children can be heard crying in the background for their mummy. It is clear that they heard what was going on and know that she was being hurt by you. As that audio was played, Saju just sort of sits there with his head in his hands and he's sobbing uncontrollably throughout. Saju claimed that he had actually never meant to kill Anju, and instead he wanted to, quote, shock her. I'm not really sure how that's possible. Wanting to shock her doesn't really make sense with getting that dressing gown cord, tying it tightly around his wife's neck, and then having to hold it tightly for a minimum of 30 seconds for Anju to actually have possibly sort of stopped struggling at the very least. But it would have taken somewhere between 4 and 5 minutes for Anju to become brain dead. In fact, it may have taken much longer than that. What is known for sure is that Anju would have put up a fight and Saju decided to continue squeezing. This was not a tactic to shock her, which in itself is fucking terrifying and horrific. But this was an action to kill. Saju's reason for then going on to murder his own children was that since he had killed his wife, and with him now deciding to die by suicide, there'd be no one else to look after them. Never mind other family members or friends. He decided he didn't want them to be alone and he'd rather they were dead. And now in court, I'm just pretty baffled. I know that you should have a defence. I do understand that it's important to have a competent defence, but Saju's defence tried to argue that he is a family man and that he is devoted to his children. The fucking audacity. I actually couldn't believe that I was reading that. I hope that you will join me in finding that absolutely barbaric. It's crazy to me that the defence decided to go down that route, seeing as he is literally on trial for the murder of his wife and 2 children. It was also argued that Saju had apparently snapped when he murdered his 3 family members, and that there had been, quote, something eating away at him with regards to him believing that his wife had been unfaithful. I actually despise that being given as a reason. It's not a reason. It doesn't matter if your partner, the mother of your children, the father of your children, your best friend, whoever it is, it doesn't matter if they have cheated on you 1,000,000 times. It's never going to be a reason for killing someone. It's so odd to me that that is used as a defence, but in this case, that's what his defence said. As I said before, I know the defence have to come up with something, and I do agree, as I said, that everyone has the right to a competent defence, but Saju has admitted to what he's done prior to this, and I really believe it's his huge ego that's caused him to think that his life is more important than the lives of those that he's taken. The defence also claimed that Saju remembered lying in bed with his children sometime after he tried to give them those poisoned drinks of chocolate, sugar, water and sleeping pills. But they say that this is the last thing he remembered before the murders. He claimed he didn't remember actually strangling them, and he had blacked out during this time, conveniently. His defence said that he was, quote, somewhat confused and, quote, befuddled by alcohol, so wasn't acting rationally. But even after his arrests and his statements had been taken, Saju was insistent that he wanted police to look into his wife's social media, her phone calls, texts, things like that, to prove her infidelity. It seems like he genuinely believed that if Anju had been cheating on him, then he would have been somehow justified in murdering her and their 2 children. It's unbelievable, but it's true. The judge said, quote, even if you had been right in your suspicion, let me make it clear that nothing could possibly justify violence, let alone the brutal murder of your family. Saju's sister did speak in court, and she spoke about just how she couldn't believe that her brother had done such a thing and that she was in absolute shock. Anju's family spokesperson told the court that Saju had actually tried to contact her and the family whilst he was in prison, but they decided not to talk to him. And a number of friends, colleagues, as well as the head teacher of Janvi and Jiva's school gave victim impact statements talking about how heartbroken they were and how much of an impact the deaths had had on them and the wider community. The defence did try to argue that a whole life order wasn't appropriate in this case. For the murder of Anju, at least, it was, quote, spontaneous. I never really understand how strangulation can be pitched as having been a spontaneous act of killing. But in this case, that's what they tried to say. They also said that because Saju was so drunk, that's what made him think his children should go with him when he died by suicide. Ultimately, Saju was given a life sentence, which means he will be at least 92 years old before he's given the opportunity to try and get out of prison. As for the community of that little area of Kettering that Anju had made her home, her presence, along with Janvi and Jiva's presence, is sorely, sorely missed. Thank you for joining me for this episode of REDRUM. Today I have a recommendation. I read this book recently, Final Girls by Riley Sager. It's about these 3 women who have survived these kind of horrific massacres where all of their friends die and they're the sole survivors. And there are 3 of them. One of them dies under these kind of mysterious circumstances. And so they'd never met before, but when this one woman dies, the other 2 decide to finally meet, and it's kind of about their journey over the next little while. But as you can imagine, if you've read any other Riley Sager books, it's not that straightforward. There's mystery and there's tension and there are a lot of lies. It's a good book. I did enjoy it. I would say I didn't love it as much as I loved his other book that I read before, which is called House Across the Lake. I would recommend that again and again. I think I probably have already recommended it on here actually. This one was a little less engaging. I think I found it hard to kind of keep going with it. I am glad that I did though. It took some turns that I wasn't expecting, and overall I'd say it was an alright read. It was maybe like 6 out of 10. I don't know why this has become a book film recommendation channel, but just for the last couple of minutes of a video, I do like to do that because I'm always reading stuff, I'm always watching stuff, so I hope that's okay. If you hate it, you can just switch off. Wow, 2 minutes in the past. Next time I'll give you a warning. I would say with regards to this book, if you like Riley Sager, then it probably is worth a read, but if you're looking for something that's just more, I don't know, engaging and thrilling, and you haven't read any of Riley's work, I'd say start with House Across the Lake, maybe skip Final Girls for now. Let me know what you think in the comments if you do read it, or if you've got any book recommendations of your own, and I'll see you next week for another episode of REDRUM. Bye.